A native of East Tennessee, Verless Doran now lives and writes in New York with his wife and 2 daughters. His prose and poetry has been published in The Smoking Poet, Dog's Plot Literary Journal, River Babel Review, The 13th Warrior Review, and many others, as well as the anthologies Heroin Love Songs and The Better Bombshell. He is the author of the short story collection The Tinker of Cannon and Some Dark Holler, the Appalachian Poems, available from Sugar Hollow Press. Please welcome Verless to our stage.
This old earthquake's gonna leave me in the floor.
They say that when you die, you see your life flash before your eyes. I saw my own grim drama played out in blacks and whites, sepia tones and sometimes colors there on my knees, the old-fashioned way, like when dead men knelt at altars. I'm not saying every death must come at an altar, but for mine, it could have taken no other form. A man's death is his own and none other's. It is custom made for him, tailored like a suit of clothes pulled snug down over the millions of moments of his life. And he sees those moments laid out and naked before death comes and smothers everything to darkness. The final mystery revealed before the closing curtain. So it was that I died, and in dying I saw the mystery of me laid out like old-time film reels, grainy and soundless. Who am I? What name do I give this quintessence of dust so earnestly pressed into the pages of this world and its beautiful, hideous history? There's 7.5 billion of us now, and who knows how many billions of us have lived in the past or will live in the future. Each second, another 4 are added and 2 are taken away. Who were they? Who are they? Who will they be? We are told to be ourselves, but who am I that I should be that? I came into this story on November 3rd, 1973, in the hills and hollers of East Tennessee. I was born the blue-eyed son to a garbage collector and a hotel maid. We grew up poor, but we grew up honest and trusting the Lord for our daily bread and the strength to face the mystery of each day with eager steps and calloused fingers. The soundtrack of my life was the sound of clear rivers running from the bosom of mountains and katydids chirping in chasms of darkness. It was the sound of old-time hymns sung in old-time churches. It was as old as the world and as pure as Eden. But like in Eden, something happened. Something happened to me in the lap of that ancient paradise that changed me forever. I saw something there that I could not unsee, and my eyes were never the same again. I was 8 years old when I first saw pornography by flashlight down in the cellar of an old house, and from that moment on, I was no longer a child. I started huffing paint at 11. By 15, I had moved on to harder drugs. My mind got ruined. It lost its inquisitiveness. It lost its drive. It lost its passion for anything but sex and drugs. They were all I wanted, all I thought about. But I was a good kid before. I never got into trouble, made straight A's in school. I stood up for the bullied and the weak. I was courteous and respectful to everyone. I read all the time, any book I could get my hands on. I read about dinosaurs, about the cosmos, about firemen, about wars, about the ocean, about everything. I wanted to be a writer when I grew up, but all of that changed. The drugs and pornography made me see myself differently, in a more self-centered light, and to see the world in a more objectified light. The world to me was skin and emissions and whatever substances I could ingest to get me through the days and all the terrible nights. In the end, I was only writing as an excuse for the way I was living. This is who I became, this sick, selfish addict. But that was not who I was born. He was who I became. I even made up a name for him, Verless, but he was born Donnie. Sweet boy with an eye for rivers and mountains and an ear for stories about knights and dragons. This Verless, he made a name for himself, legendary in some small circles. But he cost me a lot. He cost me blood and jobs and houses and wives and children. And these eyes have seen a lot. They've seen the backsides of iron bars and the insides of lunatic asylums. They've seen a donkey show in Juarez, Mexico. They've seen the fibers of a soiled pillow up close while strange men pushed into me in the dark of a Chatham County jailhouse. They saw a Tijuana stripper who'd had her throat cut once, and she fingered the scar while she spoke as if faith was not sight but touch there where a broken bottle carved revelations into her neck. They have seen a prostitute who'd do anything for a bag of coke, and they saw the man who paid to do it to her. They have seen the barrel of a gun so close they crossed to get a bead on it. They have seen their own children huddled like refugees in the corner of the room while a monster kicked at doors and windows. They have seen audiences in Seattle, Little Rock, Charleston, Asheville, San Diego, and Irwin, Tennessee. They have seen a monster in the jagged reflection of a broken window pane. They have probed the dark recesses of pornography and seen things there improper to speak of. Terrible, horrible things. I have seen myself flunk out of high school. I have seen myself dancing around skinhead fires and kicking at history with steel-toed boots. I've seen myself raise my right hand and swear to defend my country, and my country found me a year later hiding out at an Orlando crack house. I've seen myself sell out my drug supplier for a reduced sentence. I've seen myself doing time for spousal abuse. I've seen myself blow rent money and grocery money at bars or strip clubs, sitting on some stool till 2 or 3 in the morning, chatting up whatever woman would listen while my kids went to bed with ramen noodles in their bellies, and my wife worried sick about how to make a size 5 foot fit into a size 4 shoe. I've seen myself become tooth and claw. I've seen myself become a rat. I've seen myself become the villain of my own story. My eyes had already seen a lot, and then I brought them to New York. I got off the bus at Port Authority, and the words were just sitting there waiting on me like I'm the A train or that 8 a.m. open sign that lights up every morning at the methadone clinic, or other things you just can't wait to happen. Like the words can't wait for me to get back. An old faded bookmark folded between the pages of this old used book, like the old men and women pressed into sleeping bags and cardboard boxes. Old paper cups trembling, loose change at the ends of hands, still not used to this tattered asking. These frayed and frantic dreams everywhere. Somebody wanting to eat or just be somebody. Make that $1 million or that Christmas bonus or the rent for just one more week. Make that Metro card, that F train to Jamaica Station. And America flashes and blinks and yawns above like godless stars. Terrible, fashionable, unknowable. They come here every day, by the busload. They come from places like Somerset, Kentucky, and Falls Creek, Idaho, and Meridian, Mississippi, and Blowing Cave, North Carolina. They come tall, got a backbone of dreams in them. They want to be America's next top model, and Broadway superstars, and Wall Street tycoons, and hip-hop moguls, and Jerry Seinfeld, and Joey Ramone, and Lenny Briscoe from Law & Order. They want big and sleep small in little rooms and little beds, and you can hear the trains going and the bus brakes parking every night when you lay down to sleep. It never sleeps, this place, and it's hard. It's a hard place. A hard place. It's hard to drive here, hard to park here, hard to get the rent paid here. I've seen it bring proud men and women to their knees. I've seen them come here walking and leave crawling like they just went 12 rounds with Muhammad Ali in his prime. I don't even really remember my first New York feature. That's pretty sad when you stop to consider how much something like that means to someone like me who spent his whole life wanting to make it as a writer. The hills and hollers of East Tennessee are good places to dream, but they tend to cause you to dream of higher hills and deeper hollers. And there's no place on earth that's quite as high and as deep as New York City. It's real big time. I mean, that's making it. Standing on a New York City stage in the spotlight and reading your work in front of people who've paid to hear it. It's a dream come true for somebody like me. Somebody who spent his whole life writing in the dark. I was set to go on at 7 p.m., so naturally I started drinking at about 2 that afternoon. Before I got on the train, I bought me a bottle of Barton's vodka and put it in the inside pocket of my jacket. I sat on the train pulling from that little plastic bottle, going over what I was going to read as the train ran headlong into the city, under the city, down where some dreams come from. I was pretty nervous when I got there, so I ordered a shot of Jack and a beer. There were introductions and such, artists and musicians and poets and all. One guy was a writer for Rolling Stone magazine. I shook hands with him and smiled, but I felt outgunned. Really outgunned, you know. So I got loaded. I got loaded for bear and this big dream coming true. I'd picked my material out carefully. This might be my one and only shot, so I'd better give them the good stuff. I'd selected some pieces that would make me sound edgy, you know. Stuff about the Klan and dope cooks and blood feuds and congenital defects. I used the N-word a bit, you know, so I'd sound like some enlightened country boy who knew enough to not be afraid to use the word in context. I wanted them to think I was the real deal, you know. I wanted them to think I was some kind of new Southern writer, some strange new algorithm of Miles Davis and Ralph Stanley, like as if Noam Chomsky and Dolly Parton had a kid. I don't remember what happened. My time on the stage, none of it. I remember only going back to the bar afterwards and drinking. I remember talking too loud and too long. I remember stepping back from the bar and then the ceiling and then hitting the floor hard. When you're my size, you tend to stay where you fall, but this friend of mine, he got me up and got me a cab and paid my fare back to the train station. They had to carry me because I couldn't walk. The cab driver was an immigrant from somewhere, and he wanted to know about Tennessee, and I had to tell him that if I kept talking, I'd probably throw up in the back of his cab, and I did throw up in the back of his cab. When I got back home at about 4 in the morning, my wife was up, and she was all excited, wanting to know how it went, and I had to make stuff up to tell her. "Oh, they loved it, baby," I said. "You should have seen them." But I didn't know. I didn't know. I still don't. At the end, I think I was writing to validate my life, this tattered rag of skin and bones I dragged drunk and oblivious down 7th Avenue toward whatever end lay in store for me and my fractured mythos. I was not writing to validate my life in the sense of saying I was here, but rather, here is my ransom. It seemed the way of salvation to produce more than you have taken. Most of my writing heroes who created such great works of literature were far from great men in their personal lives. Dickens, who wrote of the poor and the outcast with almost Christ-like pathos, turned his wife and children penniless out into the street. Poe, who dreamed such mystery into the world, was in his private life a drunk and opium addict who wed his 13-year-old cousin. Faulkner, who questioned morality as it was a weight around the neck of the world, was behind the pages a womanizing drunk. These sins, which would be defining aspects of a normal man's life, are but footnotes in the biographies of the great artists. William Burroughs killed his second wife, and he is remembered most for his innovative literary style. Samuel Taylor Coleridge left his wife Sarah to pursue his writing and opium addiction, but we only know him as the man who wrote The Mariner. The list of sins includes rape, murder, incest, pedophilia, and fascism, and yet we forgive them all. It seemed that if you could create something that would move people enough, change the world enough, put your name high enough in the echelons of greatness, it wouldn't matter what kind of person you were in your private life. If I deserted my children, drank myself to oblivion, lost my job, blew all my money, I could console myself with the idea that these were all adding up to a greater good. When my Mariner was finished, or my Tale of Two Cities, or my Sound and the Fury, it would all even out. But it never came. And as it continued to never come, I found myself writing more and more as if to cram as much as I could onto the scale before time ran out, as if quantity might make up for content. In the beginning, I told myself that I was drinking to write. Then in the end, I found that I was writing to make up for drinking. I guess there are just some messes you can't write your way out of. My suicide was bound to happen, and that's what salvation really is, when you think about it, a kind of suicide. A death to self in exchange for life in Christ eternal. It was bound to happen. Some were sad to hear of it, but none were surprised, for I boasted of it often, whiskey-soaked slurs broadcasting my impending doom like it was some joke, as I staggered drunk into each savage night. I was just the kind of guy you expected to find dead somewhere. Suicide notes scribbled like bad poetry stuck like chewing gum to the bottom of my shoe. My life became a life that could no longer sustain itself, like a star collapsing under the pressure of bad metaphors. Come to think of it, it was not like a star. It was more like a 1968 Chevy Nova or a taxi cab, the old Crown Vics that used to be cop cars, running blind drunk and wide open down county roads and New York City streets, headlights illuminating twisted ditches and sidewalks where twisted waters ran twisted things down gutters and finally to the sea. I ran it too hard for too long, too low on oil, dashboard gauges lit up like EKGs, radio picking up random songs from random places like the sound of every sparrow falling from every tree. I wanted to hear them all. I twisted the volume knob off in my hand. It fell onto the floorboard littered with empty beer cans and condom wrappers and pages torn from family Bibles, wadded up like they had been crumpled up and smoothed out 100 times, like how I always promised each dreadful night another day. I got a day ahead of myself. I slammed too drunk into a future stopped and waiting for me like a DUI checkpoint. Blue lights flashing, no side roads, no ditch. I just got tired of running. "40 years old and riding a New York City subway. 3:30 in the morning, waiting on daylight. Nowhere to be, nowhere to go, nowhere to call home. Drunk and tired, feet wet from the holes in your shoes, pants wet from the hole in your bladder. You just sit there in your own urine and wait. Or you can decide to be someone else. You can sit there and be yourself, or you can be somebody else. I decided not to be me anymore. Though it was a far cry from deciding and being, I couldn't do it. Just like it took something external to change me into Verless, it looked like it would take something external to change me back to Donnie. I tried 12-stepping it. I tried church. I tried the power of positive thinking. None of these things could shuck me of this skin I was wrapped in. None of these could fumigate the infested corridors of my soul. I asked God to change me. That's all. I didn't care what it looked like, so long as it was good. Change me into something good, I prayed. I used to think I was a pretty smart guy. Now I only know one thing with assurance, and I know it most clearly in the dark of my house, my kids sleeping in the next room, my wife beside me. I know it most clearly in my worship there. Cars and trucks passing outside our window, the night trudging holes in the sleep of the world, feet sloshing through puddles of darkness, on the way to this death or that one. The world outside is coming apart. It don't believe anymore. It don't know that it can know anything. But I know something in my little bed while my little family sleeps. I know it was more than a universe that Christ created in me. Not evolution, not reinventing, for dead things don't evolve. No, this is Genesis 1:1. This is something from nothing. This is the word of his mouth and the work of his hands, the God of my salvation. I was many things in many places. I was a writer going by the name of Verless Doran. I was a truck driver. I was a dishwasher. I was a skinhead. I was a soldier. I was a husband. I was an adulterer. I was a cab driver. I was a carpenter. I was a sex addict. I was homeless. I was on the run from the feds. I was a preacher. I was a plumber. I was a father. I was a deadbeat. I was in jail. I was in East Tennessee. I was in Tijuana and Juarez, Mexico. I was in San Diego, Seattle, Orlando, Atlanta, and New York City. I was a drunk. Now I am Donnie Lamon. Now I am my Christian name, my mama's miracle. Now I am sober. Now I am redeemed and forgiven by the blood of Christ. Now I am a new man. I was old and worn out, heart depleted of love, mind stripped of imagination. All the beauty in the world a grotesque thing before my cataract eyes. Dark, cold glaucoma sucking the light out of every mystery. I knelt hideous and deformed before the Lord of all beauty, the Lord of all light, the Lord of all salvation. Born again, he said. Not reinvented, but made afresh from nothing. And nothing was exactly what I had. In fact, my pockets were full of it. And a child waked inside me, full of love, full of imagination, every tiny thing an incomprehensible mystery to me. It's a child's laughter now, echoing through this old body, rattling these rickety bones. It's a child's feet now, stepping through the concourses of my heart. He'll outrun this aged and sickly frame one day and run on home. Yea, Lord, let me run.
The dying thief rejoices.